Hello, my name is James Arroyo, and welcome to Chapter 6, Group Leadership. Leadership has been lionized. In many situations and times, it is the most important thing for a lot of people. And this is represented by the fact that there are hundreds of thousands of leadership books, not to mention that great leaders are always held up as our heroes. And because of that, but we never really think of what leadership actually is. So, we are going to talk about what leadership is as well as how to be an effective leader. But it gets a little bit more complicated than that. Let's dive right in. First, the definition of leadership. Leadership is a social influence process, meaning that leaders influence others. And they are directed towards positive change that reflects the mutual purpose of group members and is largely accomplished through competent communication. So, let's break that down a little bit. So, it is a leader-follower social influence process. So, it is a process and it is influence. Also, it is directed towards positive change that reflects mutual purposes of group members, and that means that if there is negative change for the leader's benefit or for others, then that is not effective leadership. And this is where we get into situations where even if, let's say, a sports leader is really, really good, if they lose, they inevitably get replaced. So, and then lastly, it is largely accomplished through competent communication. By communicating competently, we allow for more social influence to productive ends. The romance of leadership is the tendency to give too much credit to leaders for group outcomes. This could be either good or bad. For example, and I'm not saying that Phil Jackson is a bad leader by any stretch of the imagination, but having Michael Jordan on your team as well as Kobe Bryant on your team, two amazing all-stars, probably helped. Versus, maybe some poor leader or some people who are seen as poor leaders. For example, the Cleveland Browns are unable to hold on to a coaching staff because they just keep on losing. So it is something to keep in mind that we may hold too much credit on leaders, and to give them a little bit of the benefit of the doubt will allow us to maintain good leadership. So, there is a difference between leadership and followership, though. Modern research and scholars see leadership as a partnership. Leadership is fundamentally a group process, not a person. No one person can be a leader in one situation and then in a different situation be a follower. And this is reflective of the fact that leadership is not a person, it is a process. And for the group has to agree that this person is the leader. Otherwise, that person is a leader of one. There are no special guidelines for being an effective follower that diverge from what makes an effective team member. So, in general, as a follower, we should try to strive to be the best team member we can be. And in essence, this kind of takes the position of the leader role in smaller settings. And we also have to make a distinction between a leader and a manager. A leader does not ordinarily operate from positional authority, whereas managers operate from positional authority. Positional authority is, I am the boss, I am the manager, I am the leader, and that has been brought on high so I am operating from this position of, you know what, I have been deemed the leader, therefore I am the leader. That is more manager. Versus a leader, they usually operate from more interpersonal power dynamics. Also, leaders work to change the status quo. They change things and are inherently transformational. Whereas managers typically operate to maintain the status quo. Leadership implies change. Management merely implements rules and enforces policies and rules. Sometimes there are situations where people do have to act the manager, but leaders are far more impactful to the organization as a whole. Transformational leadership is bringing change about to get things done, to make things happen, to inspire, and to motivate. So, all leadership is transformational to a greater or lesser degree, but whereas managers are maintaining the status quo, maintaining the rules. We obviously want to strive to be better leaders because with rules, rules are static. And with systems, systems need to be fluid. And because of that, static rules can sometimes be challenging. That, however, rules sometimes do need to take the fore. So leadership emergence. How do leaders emerge? There are designated leaders, which are appointed by higher authority or elected by the group members. This is, hey, who gets to be the leader? Well, I like Steve. Well, I like Jim. And I like Susan. You know what? Jim, I don't know. Maybe, I don't know. Mike, I don't know. Susan. Susan is the one. I love Susan. Susan's so smart. You know, she's always paying attention in class. So, yeah, let's choose Susan. Then we have emergent leaders. And emergent leaders earn the admiration of group members and influences them by exhibiting competent communication. So in essence, they support other people around them through their communication. They guide and help and mentor people through their own communication, and therefore just end up emerging as a leader. So we want to be sure that when we are emerging as leaders, and this tends to be the common trend of emergent leadership, that we use competent communication and we will at some points emerge as a leader. However, there are some shalt nots. Thou shalt not exhibit a me orientation. This means that if you exhibit a me orientation or more focused on yourself than the goals of the team, then there is going to be a big gap and you probably will not be selected as leader. Also, thou shalt not be uninformed about a problem commanding the group's attention. This is knowledge or expert power. When power is social influence, and those who are if there is a problem that's commanding our attention and someone knows how to solve that problem, then they will be most likely to emerge as group leader. Thou shalt not manifest sluggish participation in group discussion. Again, competent communication. Sluggish participation is not good competent communication. Thou shalt not attempt to dominate conversation during the discussion. This is the opposite effect, where we take on a competitive role in group discussion, and that's not competent communication either. Thou shalt not listen poorly. By listening, that shows consideration for another person. So, we want to be sure that we are supportive leaders. And thou shalt not be rigid and inflexible. Again, change is an important part of a system, and groups work as systems. And thou shalt not display emotional incontinence. What this means is be emotionally intelligent, to be able to understand when other people are experiencing emotions, what they are going through, but also how our emotions affect ourselves. It's very okay for someone to be, you know what, can I please take a moment to myself? I feel very frustrated by this discussion, and I want to come back to it in about 5 minutes. Is that okay? At that point, that shows consideration for the other person, emotional intelligence of myself, and therefore, more often than not, someone will say, you know what, that is okay. Take a moment. We'll continue this in 5 minutes. The general emergence pattern is pretty simple of how leaders emerge. It is a process of elimination. Half the group is eliminated based on crude impressionist criteria. So, for example, maybe Steve, I saw Steve rushing into the room. Well, then he's probably not, going to be on time to things. Oh, you know what? I don't really like James's hair is a bit messed up. So therefore, maybe not him is, but negative communication patterns, the thou shalt nots, they weigh heavily in this first phase of elimination. And we will get to other reasons why, but in general, these impressionistic criteria tend not to be the best criteria by which we eliminate people. Then, second phase of elimination is the groups look for task competent individuals who are committed to group goals. So, task competent, committed to group goals. The group often turns to the member who provides a solution to the crisis, who exhibits effective listening. They are considered as well because they're listening. Also, those individuals who exhibit high levels of emotional intelligence. And then those who acquire an advocate or a lieutenant, because at that point they have already started forming coalitions. If there are more than one people who have started to acquire advocates or lieutenants, at that point then it can even develop into co-leadership. Research on leadership emergence in virtual groups parallel the findings of leaders in standard face-to-face groups. So there is very little change to online settings. Additional factors are the implicit theories in leadership, which are individuals' expectations, beliefs, assumptions about what constitutes an effective leader, influence the dynamics that favor emergence of certain individuals as group leaders. And it is no doubt not surprising to say this, to hear this. Women and ethnic minorities are disadvantaged in the emergent process. A big reason for that is because individuals' expectations, beliefs, assumptions about what constitutes an effective leader. People tend to, on average, when asked about what do they see as a leader, white man or tall, fit, built, things like that absolutely affect us. And funny enough, women tend to exhibit more of these qualities of emotional intelligence, of listening skills. So we want to be sure that we are not affected by these implicit theories of leadership, or some of these. And what can also happen is that psychopaths and narcissists can often form as a leader. Those who emerge as small group leaders do not necessarily prove to be effective leaders, in other words, because these psychopaths and narcissists know how to manipulate situations, know how to, and are very self-important, so or feel self-important. That's narcissism, and as a result, will then put themselves in these leadership positions and will act maybe even in unethical means to make everyone feel like it's impossible to work. In other words, they create a toxic communication climate. Everyone's running around with a chicken like their head cut off. And then who's the only person who's still calm, controlled, collected? The person who started it. So that is one way that that could potentially lead to psychopaths and narcissists emerging as a group leader. Leadership effectiveness not only serves as a powerful force of group achievement, but it is also a ticket to retaining good leadership. Let's jump right into the different ways that we can be leaders. And there are a ton of different strategies and theories about what it means to be an effective leader, and as a result, therefore there's much to cover. First, we have trait perspective. The trait perspective is that people are born as a leader. This perspective views leadership as a person, not as a process. And as you're going to see, that may not be necessarily the case. Traits are relatively enduring characteristics of an individual that highlight differences between people and they're displayed and that are displayed in most situations. So things like intelligence, creativity, people skills, competency, decisiveness, and trustworthiness. All of these, if you have that, then you are therefore a good leader. That being said, the principal problem with this trait approach is the assumption that effective leadership resides in a person, not in the transactions between leaders and followers conducted within group systems. So, for example, if let's say someone does not interact well with other people, but has intelligence, has creativity, has competency, has decisiveness, has trustworthiness, then therefore this perspective would therefore say that they still are a great leader, even if they don't communicate well with others. Also, one person may have a great deal of ethos or credibility in one group and may have very little ethos or credibility in another group. So it is more based in social interaction. Also keeping in mind that females are inherently disadvantaged by this perspective because, you know, because men and women do not act the same way. And since the trait perspective is more about confidence and those sorts of things, not to say that women can't be confident, but what that means is that then women are in essence disadvantaged by the male traits that are held up in the trait perspective. Intelligence, social verbal skills, and extroversion may be these irreducible minimum qualifications. So there is some efficacy to the trait perspective. We should be intelligent. We should have social and verbal skills. We should have an extroversion. But they are developed. Then there's the styles perspective. Not one style fits all. So there is the big two are the autocratic directive style, which exert control on group members, and then the democratic style, or the participative style, which encourages participation and responsibility of group members. The laissez-faire approach is the do-nothing approach, but because leadership is a means of social influence and you are not exerting influence, then we are removing this one from serious consideration. So, what are some situations where each of these styles could potentially work? In an autocratic directive style, if someone were to say, you know what, we are going to attack that hill in a military sense, we aren't going to encourage participation and responsibility of the group members. Okay, sorry, the nays have it. We are not going to attack the hill, and I guess we're just going to live to fight another day. Versus the democratic participative style, this may be more effective in maybe a classroom setting where maybe you, depending on the classroom, the students may have insights that the teacher may not have, and as a result, the teacher and the students can benefit from collaboration. What are some situations where each of these a gender also plays a role in leadership style effectiveness equation? Again, this is talking about those implicit theories. Women are able to tend to act in those democratic styles. However, they are less able to act in those autocratic styles. Another good example of these autocratic styles that work, sports coaches. They're like, yo, run 5 laps. And that helps us improve. Also, realistically, a combination of participative and directive styles is required in large groups. That we have to be somewhat democratic and also somewhat autocratic. No style of leadership will be suited for all situations any more than one set of leadership traits will mesh with every situation. So therefore, the situation needs to be thought of, and this leads to the situational perspective, matching styles with circumstances. Leadership effectiveness, this is also called the contingency perspective, if you hear it elsewhere. Leadership effectiveness may be influenced by situational forces beyond the control of any leader. If there is a group that is unable or unwilling to perform the tasks, then of course you are going to have to adapt your leadership style. There are 4 styles of leadership in Hersey and Blanchard model that flow from task and relationship emphasis. So there's the telling style, providing specific instructions on a task and closely supervise the performance of followers, but not focused on social relationships. The selling style explains and clarifies decisions, but also tries to convince followers to accept these directives. Participative style encourages shared decisions with an emphasis on development of social relationships, and then the delegating style allows the group to be self-directed. Okay, that was a lot of reading, but in general, we want to be sure that a group readiness, that is the most important part of this situation and will determine how much or how little or what type of style we should take up. The key to leadership effectiveness is matching the appropriate style to the group situation. The primary variable, again, is the readiness of the followers. Readiness is the extent to which the followers demonstrate the ability and willingness to accomplish specific tasks. So, let's say that the group knows how to work together, they're already doing the specific task, and they are very willing to achieve that specific task. Maybe they get some sort of monetary benefit every time that they achieve this task. So, of course, they are ready to go. They want to do the work. If someone therefore engaged in a telling situational style, in essence, providing specific instructions on task and closely supervise the performance of the followers, but not focused on the social relationships, then of course that is going to cause a lot of challenges versus more of a participative or delegating situation. Again, where participative is encouraging shared decisions with emphasis on development of social relationships, or even allowing the group to be very self-directed. Versus a situation, have you ever had to deal with a group of children? Readiness probably is very low in this situation. And as a result, a lot of telling and maybe even selling would probably be the most ideal version of this. And as someone starts in an organization, the performance readiness starts at R1, the green, and then goes up. So at some point, there has to be a forming into telling, then to selling, then to participating, and maybe even get all the way down to delegating. The situational model of leadership rightfully emphasizes the significance of context in leadership effectiveness, the importance of flexible use of styles to fit different situations, and the necessity of attending to fluctuations in task and social requirements of the group. because sometimes the task is very important. Sometimes it's not as important, because if there's the task behavior, if like something has to be done like immediately, telling and selling may be the best ways of going about it versus the maybe less important, and maybe they already are doing the task effectively. At that point, participating and delegating would probably be the best styles of this communication situation. Now we move to disruptive leadership. This is a sharing function. This perspective truly embraces the view that leadership is a process, not a person. Finding the right balance between task requirements and social needs is viewed as essential, very much like the situational perspective. Leadership as a shared responsibility is demonstrated when any member steps in and assumes whatever role in the group is required at a particular moment that has not been filled by any other member. So for example, it is in general a more fluid process of who is leader. Someone may take the role of leader while other people then stand down as a leader. And then maybe another person may emerge. And it's a continuous fluid process of sharing this leadership. Ethical leadership, the key principle of an ethical leadership is to serve others and is recently gaining popularity. Servant leadership is the place the good of the followers over their own interest and emphasize the followers' development as a person and as an employee or wherever. They demonstrate strong moral behavior towards the followers. They are so in essence, this we orientation versus a me orientation is brought to the next level. That it's not about me at all. I am willing to sacrifice for the group to improve and develop the group. Scrupulous honesty is important, respectful, fair towards followers, provides choices for followers when possible, and also responsible for helping the group achieve its goals in ethical ways. So, this is something to look up to. Absolutely. We should try to be more servant leaders. Then, with culture and leadership, are these theories universal? Most scholarship, frankly, is American, but there do seem to be some universals in cross-cultural leadership of research. In more individualistic cultures, leaders are lionized, are seen as the best people, versus in more collectivistic cultures, leaders may be seen as the people who are trying to take power and are trying to, raise themselves up. And as a result, it's seen as somewhat less than. So it is something to keep in mind that there are different perspectives on leadership throughout culture. Now we get to the communication competence perspective, and this is the overarching view. Communication competence is the heart of leadership effectiveness. How well the leader does depends on how well they communicate. Showing respect for followers is a critical communication imperative for leaders. We have to be able to show respect, not just be respectful, but to show this respect. Unfortunately, respect from leaders is highly desired by followers, but too rarely experienced. That we end up not having situations like that. In fact, in most leadership situations, there is this sort of managership rule that, and because of that, there is superiority versus equality. This again is one of those things that leads to a toxic communication culture, thereby reinforcing our perspective that communication competence is at the heart of this, and as a result, shows a lack of respect. So we want to be sure that we're being communication competent. At that point, we are done. Have a great rest of your day. I'll see you all next time. Bye.